Warning, this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Thanks for tuning in to Harvesting Happiness today for a healthy serving of consciously prepared brain food. This is Lisa Cypers-Kamen, your host. For more than 13 years, I've been handcrafting these sound ideas for better well-being. Each week, I love spotlighting diverse thinkers and doers who are contemporary trendsetters and change agents, devoting their lives to creating a better world in which to live. I invite you to listen up and change the way you think about human happiness. Our award-winning content is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Alrighty then, let's dive in. This episode offers psychosocial education designed to inspire and motivate our listeners. The information provided does not constitute a therapeutic relationship nor a substitute for professional mental health care. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, call 911, go to your nearest emergency room, or for listeners in the United States, text 988 for the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's show, where we're talking about unlocking happiness, the power of lifelong learning and curiosity. Think for a second. Remember the excitement of learning something new as a child? That sense of wonder and accomplishment when you first figured out how to ride a bike, solve a puzzle, or read a book? That joy doesn't have to end with childhood. And in fact, lifelong learning is the secret to maintaining that spark of happiness throughout our lifetime. Today's guest is Dr. Zena Hitz. She is a scholar of classical philosophy, especially questions about law, character, friendship, and the human good. She writes about freedom, education, happiness, the decline of institutions, faith, hope, and love. Her book, Lost in Thought, Hidden Pleasures of an Intellectual Life, has received positive media recognition around the world. She's received the Hyatt Prize in the Humanities in 2020 and is the founder and president of the Catherine Project, a tuition-free online learning community. This conversation originally took place in January of 2023. However, it is more relevant than ever now, based upon where we're at in this space and time. So let's revisit ways to find happiness through a pursuit of lifelong learning. Who earned her PhD at Princeton and is a tutor at St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland. Her book, Lost in Thought, has been widely discussed, including in the Wall Street Journal, the Chicago Tribune, El Mundo, and the Irish Times. It's been translated into multiple languages. She received the Hyatt Prize in the Humanities in 2020 and is the founder and president of the Catherine Project. And we'll talk about the Catherine Project in the course of our conversation. But first, here's Zena. And Zena, I'm so happy to have you here because this practice that you've identified, this process that a lot of people actually go through without even realizing it's a practice, is so valuable.
Thanks so much, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here. It's learning for its own sake. That's one way of describing the practice.
Yes.
And I think it's something you find in the youngest children, and it's something that everyone from any walk of life can find a way into and use and cultivate as a resource, however their life turns out, whatever its vicissitudes, its ups and downs, and wherever they start from.
Well, this practice that you write about is something that is quite barrier-free, and that is what I like about it. You know, that it's class-free, color-neutral. How much money you have or don't have doesn't matter. What your education is does not matter. It's this process of being curious.
That's right. If you'd like, I could begin with an example.
Yes.
By a story. And it's the story that I've gone back to again and again in talking about my work. And it's based actually on there's a novel called The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Barbary. But there's a wonderful film called The Hedgehog, or La Hérisson, where the central character, her name is Renee. She's the concierge of a upper-class apartment building in Paris. She, of course, herself being a concierge, being like a building superintendent, is working class. She's very unusual for a film. She's middle-aged. She's a little pudgy. She wears slouchy cardigans. She's clearly going gray. Her face is getting wrinkled. She is not a picture-perfect movie star. And she puts on a front of just what everyone expects her to be in the building. Someone frumpy, cranky, and interested only in getting the job done. But she has a secret life. And her secret life is pictured, it's so beautiful in the film, I highly recommend it, where she has a hidden room behind her kitchen. It's stuffed with books. And she retreats into her room and she reads philosophy, literature, you name it, everything under the sun. And two residents of the building, one is a 12-year-old girl named Paloma, who is sort of fed up with the rat race that even at her age she can see is everyone around her is involved in, and this idea that only achievement matters, only success matters. So she finds Renee, and she sees the door through the little window into the portal of the supervisor's lodge, and she says, "What's behind the door?" She knows that something is there. They form a very deep friendship, and also a new Japanese resident who's also, for obvious reasons, on the outside of this upper class French building, he also finds a close affinity with her. So these three people form these very close friendships on the basis of something other than the social class that divides them, something which is very human, very profound, and which takes them through whatever happens to them in their life. So that's my first example of learning for its own sake. It's a refuge from the world. It's a way of retreating from social diminishment, whether that's by social class or by race or what have you, or by middle age for that matter. I think.
Hey, careful.
I think as I move closer into middle age, I think a lot about the diminishments of middle age, especially for women, and it's a way to find one's dignity that is beyond all of that, and to form bonds of communion with others.
As you're talking, the words quiet elegance came to mind. That in this space of learning, in the space of contemplation and the pursuit of the intellect, there's this quiet elegance that emerges.
I think that's the perfect set of descriptors for Renee. And it's a kind of elegance that's hard won from her circumstances, since in most respects, of course, she's not elegant.
Yes.
She's slouchy, frumpy, etc. Or I'm using the disparaging terms. She's informal, she's relaxed, and she's middle-aged. That would be the non-judgmental ways of putting it. But she has this poise. She has this center. She has this center, which is her life of reading and thinking and the world of books. And that gives her a kind of elegance that is much greater, I think, than ordinary elegance.
Well, you don't know, but I'm going to say something, that when we talk about the things that make us happy, that what research has shown that makes us happy, and the values in action that the VIA, which was Martin Seligman and Chris Peterson, two of the grandfathers of positive psychology, they talk about a love of lifelong learning as being one of those strengths or one of those predictors of people who self-report as being happier or more satisfied with their lives.
That makes perfect sense to me. And I'll tell you why. The world that I come from originally, where I was trained as a scholar, is classical Greek philosophy. And Plato and Aristotle are sort of the big figures from classical philosophy. And what they both argued was that work, just doing something for the sake of something else. So working for money or going to the grocery store to buy milk, most of what we do is for the sake of an end. It's instrumental. But if all our lives are things that are just instrumental, are just means to ends, if it's all just going to the grocery store or all just working for money, then our lives don't make any sense. So we need some activity in which what we do culminates, where we can say, this is the reason I'm alive. This is what I was doing everything else for. And they thought it was learning, Plato and Aristotle. They thought it was contemplation that did that. And I think depending on how broad you want to take it, that contemplation and that learning, I think it's absolutely true.
I agree. And the definition of learning and contemplation is very individual as well.
I think that's right. So, I just gave this example, told the story about this woman who reads a lot of books. That's one of the main examples. And I teach at a college where we read a lot of old books. So that's an example that's dear to my heart. But another of my favorite stories is about a man named John Baker. Now, this is a real life story, not a fictional story. John Baker grew up in England in the middle of the 20th century. He worked at the Automobile Association office, so the British equivalent of AAA. Couldn't be a more boring kind of paper-pushing job that you could imagine. And he never went to college or university. He never got a higher degree, but he loved literature. And he got very interested in peregrine falcons and rode around on his bicycle, tracking the peregrine falcons in his region, which is the Essex region. And he followed them on bicycles. He made charts. He made maps. He took journals. He made drawings. He collected everything he could learn about these birds with his bare eyes. He took in. He did this for 10 years in his spare time, outside of work, outside of his office. And then he wrote this incredible book called The Peregrine. It's almost like a prose poem where he really confronts what it means to be a human being, trying to look at a natural animal, a natural creature, trying to be a part of nature, but also our failures to really be able to enter into the world of animals. So it's very profound, it's very beautiful, and it's 10 years of this office worker following birds around on a bicycle. And that doesn't involve books. It involves just looking at what's around you in the world with great care and with great attention and really trying to understand what you're seeing.
To that point, I have a question for you about washing dishes.
My favorite topic.
Yes, and the restoration of your own intellectual life.
Yes. That question is, how did washing dishes restore my intellectual life? I worked as a scholar, as an academic for some years. I was one of these kids. I went straight from college to grad school. I was in grad school for literally 9 years in classical philosophy. I went straight into teaching. And as a result, I was a kind of distorted person in many ways, as I think any particular activity that you're devoted to wholeheartedly when you're young can do. I think it happens to athletes. It happens to people who go whole hog into any career. So I got increasingly sort of disillusioned and felt like my work didn't really matter. It didn't really connect with what I cared about. And so I picked up and left. I joined a religious community in rural Ontario. It's a Roman Catholic community called Madonna House. And there it was all about manual labor. So we had a library, a good reader's library. And there were some quite interesting people from all walks of life. But I couldn't do that thing which I had trained myself to do my whole life anymore. And I had to find another way to live the life of the mind. And that was a wonderful opportunity for me to enter into the intellectual life of ordinary people. So for me, I did a lot of washing dishes. Washing dishes, sweeping floors, emptying the trash, cooking. I did some refinishing of antiques and refinishing of furniture, some restoration of old objects. But whatever I was doing, my mind was left free to just think about things, to take in whatever was going on in the current moment, whatever I'd read in the past, whatever stories I'd heard, whatever guests had been at the table. And it was an incredibly profound experience because it balanced me. It put my mind in a place that was more incarnate, more in everyday life. And it helped me to see how available intellectual life is for everybody, even for people who have, strictly speaking, very little free time.
Yeah. We're going to take a brief break. And then when we come back, we will continue the conversation with Zena Hitz. We're talking about Lost in Thought, the hidden pleasures of an intellectual life. To learn more, please visit zenahitz.net, on Twitter at @ZenaHitz. Here comes the pause. We'll be right back. Wait. Before we take that pause, let's talk about the summer sizzle and how all the warm weather outdoor activities can wreak havoc on our hair. If you're anything like me, with all that time out in the sun, our scalps and hair could use some serious rescue, making right now the perfect time to start Nutrafol. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, with over 1 million people seeing thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding. Just like our skin, the condition of our hair reflects our overall health. Both external and internal factors can impact the way our hair looks, feels, and grows. Physician-formulated and drug-free, Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within to target the key root causes of thinning, including stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism, all through whole body health. In clinical studies, 86% of women saw improved growth after taking Nutrafol supplements twice daily for 6 months, and 72% of men saw more scalp coverage after 6 months. I've been using Nutrafol religiously for more than 2 years. Shedding has been significantly reduced. My hair is now thicker and healthier because of Nutrafol. Plus, some remarkable bonus side benefits include better sleep, improved stress response, and a significant reduction of those pesky menopause symptoms, including hot flashes. Nutrafol is my go-to source to help keep my strands strong from the inside out. No matter your lifestyle or stage of life, Nutrafol is a great solution that targets the root causes of thinning and supports hair growth from within. Nourishing your hair with a growth routine is simple. Get Nutrafol sent right to your door with easy online purchasing, no prescriptions or doctor visits required. Automated deliveries ensure you'll never miss a day, and you'll see results in 3 to 6 months. Get results you can run your fingers through. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code HH. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code HH. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code HH. Now let's take that break. We'll be right back. Research tells us that happiness is good for our health. Happy people live longer, are more productive, and make better partners, parents, and professionals. Want more sound ideas for better well-being? Check out our new bonus edition content, More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness, available exclusively on Medium and Substack. One thing I know for certain, happiness waits for no one, and at times we all need a little support. To learn more about lifestyle management and mental fitness consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. And we're back continuing the conversation with my guest today, Professor Zena Hitz. We're talking about unlocking happiness, the power of lifelong learning and curiosity. Let's get back to the conversation. Zena, before the break, you wanted to go into another story about speaking with mothers, and I would love for you to pick up where we've left off.
Yes, thank you so much, Lisa. What I was thinking about was how much trouble we have with all of the busyness of contemporary life, all of the hectic character of it, all of the multiple tasks that are crowding in us at any given time. And one of the things that I discovered in the monastery was the balancing effect of certain kinds of manual tasks. So for me, the paradigm case of someone who is pushed in a million directions and has hardly any time to think is these moms who I talk to who have young children, who are always looking for ways to feel less like they're being used up in their circumstances and more to connect with who they are as human beings, who they once were. And maybe they don't have time to read a whole book at this stage when the kids are really little, but they can gather little snatches of things to read, things to think about, things to contemplate. And that was the point that I was trying to make, just that anyone's, no matter their walk of life, can find these spaces and tap into that capacity to contemplate and to learn and to understand.
In your book, Lost in Thought, The Hidden Pleasures of an Intellectual Life, you write about uselessness. And I would love for you to talk with us about that, because we are taught in the Western world that all things we do should somehow be useful.
Yeah, well, as an educator, as someone in the education sector, it's something you hear all the time. So everything has to be useful. Every piece of learning has to be for an end. It has to be training you for a job. It has to have a number, a metric, a learning outcome. It has to contribute to your income. It has to be useful for this. It has to be useful for that. And I think that way of thinking is very destructive to the dimension of humanity that I'm trying to bring out, where what matters is having the leisure to ponder something which may not seem like it matters at the time. It could be the most pointless little detail. I mean, why do peregrine falcons matter? Why do Russian novels matter? You can't plug them into some algorithm and get cash out the other end in any obvious way. And I think when we think about learning that way, we're also thinking of ourselves that way. We're diminishing ourselves into cash generators. So the idea of learning for its own sake was where I first came to in thinking about this, that there's something about just thinking about the useless things, thinking about rocks, thinking about birds, thinking about old books, thinking about, in my college, we read ancient treatises on mathematics. Now, there is nothing more useless in the world. It's ancient, it's, so to speak, obsolete. But I'm telling you, it's a journey into another world to read these old books of mathematics. And it shapes our inner lives. It shapes our capacities to understand and to see and to imagine. And it helps us to grow and develop as human beings. I think if you think about every kind of value that you might want to produce, it's going to have to culminate in that. It's going to have to be something which makes life more rich and full for a human being. And part of what I want to do is to bring our attention back to that. What's good for us? What do we care about? What develops us? What helps us to grow?
I will share with you a secret learning pleasure. It falls into this category, and that is weeding.
Yes. Perfect. Yes.
Getting on one's hands and knees and weeding and paying close attention to the vast amount of life that resides in that soil.
That is the perfect example. I was thinking about this just last summer. There's a particular type of weed that grows in my flower bed, and I decided one year I was just going to try to root out every last weed, And so it was on my hands and knees. I didn't have many tools. And part of what I was trying to figure out is, where does this plant go? How does it work? What's its shape? How does it feed? How is it like or unlike other plants? And you also just in the most basic way, you're in the world of things that grow and in the world of vegetation, which in some ways is very comforting and familiar. In other ways, it's kind of gross and weird and can even be frightening in certain ways. I think weeding is a perfect example. It's something which in a way is a means to an end, but it also opens up whole dimensions of life to us and helps us to see better.
Yes, and it's so relaxing. Like, who knew, right? Just
I know.
That process of just sort of getting one's hands dirty and observing this very microcosmic environment is this practice that I interpret what you're describing.
I think that's right. And I just want to correct my own course a little bit in case I sound like I'm describing something which is automatic. I do think that thinking about this type of contemplation should motivate those of us who have people in our hire, who can hire and fire people, who run small companies and so on. Because I think the workload for many people is extremely severe. So if I have to weed, it's one thing for me to weed my garden on a Saturday afternoon. I don't really have to do it. I can stop when I want. But if we're asking people to undertake tasks that are totally results directed, then we're diminishing that capacity of theirs to reach into their humanity. So I think that's just one thing I like to say to, we don't all of us have make choices that affect others that way. But when we do, I think it's important to think about it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I do. And I find this fascinating because it is calling upon us to think about our processes a little bit,
Exactly.
And it's a quiet thing,
Yeah.
It's very personal. It's very quiet. It gives another view of the mindful life.
I think that's right. And I do want to say too that although it's quiet, it's hidden. A title for my book I wanted for a while, my editor wouldn't accept it. I wanted to call it The Hidden Life of Learning. And because hiddenness, quietness, littleness is a big part of what I'm interested in. I mean, you think about the learned taxi driver. There are these people, they've learned everything. They know everything about some subject, but they're not professionals. They do something completely different, and you only discover them by chance. So on the one hand, it's very hidden and quiet and little, and that's beautiful. On the other hand, I think if we talked about it more and honored that kind of thing more, then we could help all of us to value what really matters in ourselves and in others.
I like that. And it does, maybe it hides in plain sight, right? It's there.
Exactly.
But if you don't know what to look for, you miss it in a blink.
Exactly. That's why talking about it is important, because it's right in front of you everywhere. You start paying attention to whether or not the people that learn, or how they think, or how they understand, or how they contemplate. You will see everyone that differently. Everyone has something going on of this kind. And it's a constant delight to me to discover these things.
I've got a good one. I was in an Uber in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, and I had a driver who was from Pakistan, and he was a chartered accountant from England. That's where he took his education. He ended up in an arranged marriage with a woman in Toronto. Things did not go very well for him with the marriage. They got a divorce, and he was trying to earn extra money to get back to Pakistan, where his father was running a small boutique hotel up in the mountains. And he proceeded to tell me that he learned how to import trucks from the United States to Canada because there's a shortage of used cars in North America, and now he knows how to import absolutely everything.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, no, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. And this is a kind of knowledge where, I want to know I want to know what it is, having heard your story. Like, what does it mean to know how to import things? What exactly are the mechanisms?
Yeah.
What's the instruments? Because it's like the weeds, right? It's these things which are there all the time. You don't even think about them, but once you take a look, this whole dimension of our lives opens up.
And he was adorable. He said, I did it with a friend, and in like 3 days we figured it out, and we made $3,000 on the first truck, and then we made more on the second truck. And he says, now I can do anything. And I was like, you can do anything. You figured it out.
That's a wonderful story.
Yeah, but this is, I think, what you're talking about, right? Is these little nooks and crannies, or the dark hallways of our lives that we sometimes don't step into.
I think that's right. Yeah.
That prove us to be, smarter, better, and more clever than we give ourselves credit for.
I mean, one of the sets of stories that I love most about this kind of thing and that I collect is stories about prisoners, about people in prison. The attorneys. That's true. A lot of them become attorneys. But I always look for the more contemplative. So, Malcolm X, the great African-American activist, he was put in jail for theft as a young man, and he read the entire prison library, and he came out a different person. He read classics of philosophy, he read atlases, he read dictionaries, he read everything. and it made him who he was. It helped him to understand the kind of person that he wanted to be. And literally, once you see one of those stories, you see them everywhere. It's just incredible what a certain amount of either a need or an empty space or an unexpected turn of events, and suddenly the capacity to learn just gets opened up in this tremendous way.
If we pay attention and we roll up our sleeves and dive in for the sake of the diving,
Exactly.
Zena Hitz, thanks for being with me today. We're talking about Lost in Thought, the hidden pleasures of an intellectual life. To learn more about Zena Hitz and her work, please visit zenahitz.net. And on Twitter, you can find her at Zena Hitz. Zena, thanks a million for sharing part of your day with me.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It was a pleasure.
I feel the same way. Thanks for joining us on Harvesting Happiness today. This is Lisa Cypers-Kamen on behalf of my guest, Dr. Zena Hitz, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day, and remember to be kind to one another. Want to take a deeper dive into sound ideas for better well-being? Check out our new bonus edition content, More Mental Fitness by Harvesting Happiness, available exclusively on Medium and Substack. Keep harvesting your own happiness anytime, anywhere from the comfort of wherever you are. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes from wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with and follow us on most social media channels. To learn more about lifestyle management and mental fitness consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Harvesting Happiness and More Mental Fitness are produced by me, Lisa Cypers-Kamen, Andrea Mengele, Robin Boyd, Andrea Daly, and the awesome team at Podfly Productions, including Eric Begay, Kimberly Beck, and Alec Guess, in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU, RadioMalibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.